The Arizona desert in 1878 sprawled like a desolate ocean of red sand, its surface rippling under the merciless glare of a midday sun that turned the horizon into a shimmering mirage. Dust Canyon, a remote outpost carved into the shadow of towering mesas and scattered saguaros, baked under a sky devoid of mercy, its cracked earth whispering tales of hardship. Henry Blake trudged into the settlement, his broad shoulders hunched beneath a dust-caked canvas coat, his boots worn thin from months of prospecting. At 46, his face was a weathered map of lines etched by sun and solitude, a faint scar along his jaw, a memento of a cave-in that had nearly claimed him. His hat, battered and sweat-stained, shaded gray eyes that carried a quiet resignation, a man wandering since his mining crew abandoned him years ago, leaving him with a pickaxe, a rifle, and a heart heavy with unfulfilled dreams. He'd come to Dust Canyon to trade a meager haul of quartz for water and supplies, his canteen dry, his sack light after a fruitless season. The outpost was a sparse collection of lean-tos and trading posts, its silence broken only by the groan of a windmill and the distant howl of a coyote. As Henry bartered with a grizzled merchant, a faint sound caught his ear, a weak, rasping whimper, barely audible over the wind. He turned, his hand on his rifle, and saw him. A child, no older than 8, collapsed near a mesquite thicket, his small frame half buried in the sand, his dark hair matted with dust, his ribs stark against a tattered shirt. The boy's eyes, wide and sunken, met Henry's, a silent plea for help, his trembling hand clutching a small pouch. Henry's heart clenched. He'd heard tales of Apache families scattered by raids, their children left to perish in the desert's grip. This boy, abandoned and starving, stirred a memory his own son, lost to fever, a loss that had driven him to the wilds. He knelt, his hands gentle as he checked the child's pulse, finding it faint but present. "I'm Henry Blake," he said, his voice gruff but kind. "Can you walk?" The boy shook his head, his voice a whisper. "Mika." Henry nodded, lifting him with care, the boy's weight a feather compared to the burden of his own solitude. He carried Mika to a shaded overhang near the well, laying him on his coat. Using water from his canteen, Henry cleaned the boy's cracked lips and bandaged a gash on his arm with a strip torn from his shirt. Mika watched him, his trust a fragile thread, his pouch held tight. "Why help me?" he asked, his voice weak. Henry met his gaze, his scar itching under the sun. "Lost my boy once, can't leave you to die." Mika's eyes softened, but suspicion lingered, a reflection of a life shaped by loss. As he worked, the outpost quiet shattered 3 figures approached, their silhouettes stark against the dunes. They were Apache women, their buckskin dresses adorned with faded beads, their faces painted with earth tones, their steps deliberate. The leader, a tall woman with a stern jaw, spoke first. "I am Lena. This is Mara and Sita. We seek the boy Mika, our kin." Henry stood, his rifle ready but lowered. "He's hurt. I found him starving. Took him in." Lena's eyes narrowed, assessing him. "You saved him. His tribe was raided, scattered by Jack Rourke, a bandit who hunts our gold. We were left to find him." Mara, with a gentle face, carried a woven basket, while Sita, her spear at the ready, scanned the horizon. "We bring thanks," Lena said, offering a blanket. "But Rourke follows. Your help makes you a target." Henry's stomach tightened. Rourke's name was a curse, a man who'd plundered Apache lands, his greed a shadow over the desert. "I'll protect him," he said, the words a vow he hadn't planned. The women entered his camp, their presence a mix of gratitude and wariness. Lena tended Mika, her hands skilled, while Mara unpacked dried meat, and Sita stood guard. "He's my nephew," Lena said. "His parents were killed. We hid, but Rourke's men are close." Henry nodded, his mind racing, his solitude shattered, his compassion drawing danger. "Stay tonight," he said. "We'll figure this out." That night, the camp buzzed with quiet activity. Mika ate sparingly, his strength returning, his pouch a silent mystery. Lena shared their story, Rourke's raid on their village, the theft of their gold, their flight into the desert. "Mika knows where it's hidden," she said. "That's why they hunt him." Henry's heart sank. Gold was a magnet for death, but Mika's life was worth more. "I'll keep him safe," he repeated, his resolve firming. As the fire crackled, hoofbeats echoed in the distance, growing louder. Henry grabbed his rifle, the women rising with their weapons. Shadows loomed. Rourke's scouts, 3 riders with rifles glinting. The leader, a wiry man with a scarred lip, called out. "Hand over the boy, Prospector, or we burn this place." Henry's jaw tightened. "You'll have to kill me first," he shouted, his voice steady. The skirmish was brief. Henry fired, his shot grazing a rider's arm, sending him reeling. Lena's spear struck another, while Sita's arrow pinned the third sleeve to a cactus. The scouts retreated, their threats lingering. "Rourke'll come for you." Henry lowered his rifle, his heart pounding. Sarah's eyes met his, a flicker of respect breaking through. "You didn't have to," she said. Henry wiped sweat from his brow, his scar itching. "Ain't right, what they did. I've got my own ghosts." The women settled Mika, their gratitude a quiet bond. Lena offered Henry a beaded bracelet. "You're kin now," she said. The desert stretched vast, its silence a promise of more trials. But Henry's act of mercy had ignited a spark, a family forged in dust and danger, with Rourke's wrath looming on the horizon. The Arizona desert unfurled like a relentless sea of red sand as Henry Blake, Mika, and the three Apache women, Lena, Mara, and Sita, ventured away from Dust Canyon, the sun dipping low to cast long shadows across the arid expanse. Henry trudged ahead, his canvas coat dusted with the day's toil, his worn boots sinking into the shifting sands, his pickaxe slung over his shoulder alongside his rifle. His face, weathered with a scar along his jaw, bore a mixture of determination and unease, his gray eyes scanning the horizon for signs of Jack Rourke's men. Mika walked beside him, the young Apache boy of 8 leaning on a makeshift crutch fashioned from a branch, his tattered shirt fluttering in the breeze, his small pouch clutched tightly against his chest. The beaded bracelet from Lena gleamed on Henry's wrist, a symbol of the uneasy alliance that had formed in the wake of his rescue. Lena led the group, her buckskin dress adorned with faded beads, her spear poised, her stern jaw set with resolve. Mara, gentle-faced, carried a woven basket of provisions, while Sita, her eyes sharp, trailed with a bow, her presence a quiet strength. They headed toward a hidden Apache settlement near Whispering Rocks, a 2-day trek where the women hoped to find safety for Mika and themselves. Henry carried a sack of jerky and a half-filled canteen. His prospecting days paused for this new purpose, the heat seeping into his bones like a persistent foe. The presence of Lena, Mara, and Sita stirred a compassion in Henry he'd buried since his crew abandoned him, their gratitude a mirror to his loneliness, their warning of Rourke a shadow over his mercy. "We need to reach the rocks by nightfall," Henry said, his voice rough from the dry air. Lena nodded, her gaze steady. "The desert hides us if we're wise," she replied, her Apache wisdom guiding them through the wasteland. Mika's silence, broken only by soft breaths, hinted at a fear he couldn't voice. The gold his tribe had hidden, a burden he carried alone. The journey was grueling, the sand shifting underfoot, the sled creaking with Mika's weight, his crutches a constant challenge. Henry's mind churned with the day's events, his impulsive rescue of Mika, the arrival of the women, the threat of Rourke. He'd taken the boy to ease his own guilt, but their presence now drew danger, a price he hadn't foreseen. He offered Mika water, a gesture of goodwill, his hand trembling slightly. Mika accepted, his eyes narrowing. "Why help me?" he asked, his voice weak. Henry met his gaze, his scar itching under the sun. "Lost my son once. Can't leave you to die like that." Mika's expression softened, but suspicion lingered, a reflection of a life shaped by loss and betrayal. The women walked with a quiet dignity, their buckskin dresses rustling softly, their beads catching the fading light. Lena shared their story as they moved, her voice low. "Rourke raided our village, stole our gold, killed most. Mika's parents hid him, but we were scattered. He's the last who knows where it's buried." Mara added, her tone gentle. "We've tracked him since, fearing Rourke's men." Sita, her bow ready, muttered, "He'll kill us all for it." Henry's heart sank. Gold was a curse, a lure that had ruined men, but Mika's life was worth more. "I'll keep him safe," he said, his resolve firming, though doubt gnawed at him. Their progress halted at midday, when they reached a trading post, tucked into a dry Arroyo Sands crossing, a haven for outlaws and wanderers. Henry needed supplies, his stores depleted, but the women tensed. "Danger here," Lena warned. "Men talk." Henry nodded, his rifle ready. Inside, the air was stifling, the stench of sweat and stale beer thick. A scout named Luke Tanner, a wiry man with a patchy beard, leaned against a barrel, his eyes narrowing. "Henry Blake," he said. "Heard you took in an Apache brat and his kin. Rourke's offering a bounty." Henry's jaw tightened, his past with gold-hungry raids flashing. "Mind your own, Luke," Tanner smirked, his gaze on Mika. $200 says I tell him where you're headed. Lena's spear flashed, pinning Tanner's sleeve to the wood. Speak, and you die, she hissed. Henry stepped forward, his rifle aimed. Walk away, Luke. This ain't your fight. Tanner paled, yanking free and fleeing, his laughter echoing. Rourke'll hunt you down. Henry cursed under his breath. Luke's treachery would lead Rourke straight to Whispering Rocks. We move now, he said. The women's respect grew, their trust a tentative thread. You're not like them, Mara said. Henry shook his head, the weight of his past pressing down. I've been. The ambush came at dusk. Hoofbeats thundered through the sand, and 4 of Rourke's men, led by a scar-faced rider named Cole, surrounded them near a rocky outcrop. Hand over the boy, Prospector. Cole barked, his rifle raised. Henry fired, his shot grazing Cole's arm, sending him staggering. Lena's spear struck another, while Sita's arrow pinned a third's leg. Mara threw a rock, distracting the 4th, who fled shouting threats. Rourke'll burn you out! They took cover behind the rocks, bandaging minor cuts, the heat seeping into their exhaustion. Sarah's eyes met Henry's, her suspicion easing. You fight for us, she said. Henry wiped sweat from his brow, his scar itching. Ain't right what Rourke did. I've got blood on my hands from men like him. Lena nodded, her pain surfacing. He raided us for gold. Mika's the last who knows where it's hidden. Henry's breath caught gold was the key, a prize worth killing for. We'll keep it safe, he said, his resolve hardening. Their bond deepened as they rested, Henry sharing his canteen, the women offering figs from their basket. Why carry that pouch? He asked Mika. The boy opened it, revealing a small gold nugget, its edges worn. My father gave it. He said it marks the gold. Rourke killed him for it. Henry's heart ached, his losses echoing theirs. I lost my crew to greed, drifted since. Sita's gaze softened. We're all lost then. Maybe we find each other. The night stretched ahead, the desert vast, but the threat of Rourke grew. Henry taught Mika to hold his rifle, the boy's hands steadying under his guidance. Lena showed him Apache tracking signs, their partnership a lifeline. You're strong, Henry said. Mika smiled, a rare light in his eyes. You too. The women watched, their trust deepening, a family forged in the crucible of the desert. But the peace was fleeting. Hoofbeats returned, closer now Cole and his men, relentless as the sun. Henry chose a defensible ridge, setting up with the group behind rocks. We fight if we must, he said, his rifle ready. Lena nodded, her spear poised. Cole's men appeared, their rifles glinting. Last chance, Blake, Cole shouted. Henry fired, his shot dropping a rider, but an arrow grazed Mara's arm, drawing a cry. Sita shielded her bow singing, forcing the attackers to retreat. They bandaged Mara's arm, Henry's hands gentle. You're all family now, he said. Lena's eyes met his, a warmth breaking through. And you're ours. The desert tested them, its trials forging a bond, but Rourke's wrath loomed larger, a storm they'd faced together. Whispering Rocks was near, but so was their reckoning. The Arizona desert stretched like an endless crucible of red sand, its surface baking under the relentless glare of a midday sun that transformed the air into a shimmering furnace of heat and dust. Henry Blake, Mika, and the 3 Apache women Lena, Mara, and Sita pressed onward, the makeshift sled creaking behind Henry's weary steps, the chestnut mare Dusty plodding through the shifting dunes. Henry's canvas coat was soaked with sweat, his worn boots sinking into the sand, his pickaxe and rifle slung across his back, his face weathered with a scar along his jaw, his gray eyes scanning the horizon with a mix of determination and exhaustion. Mika limped beside him, his tattered shirt fluttering, his small pouch with the gold nugget pressed against his chest, his crutches a constant challenge, his dark eyes wide with a fragile hope. The beaded bracelet from Lena gleamed on Henry's wrist, a symbol of the uneasy alliance that had formed in the desert's grip. Lena led the group, her buckskin dress adorned with faded beads, her spear poised, her stern jaw set with resolve. Mara, her gentle face lined with concern, carried a woven basket now light on provisions, while Sita, her bow ready, trailed with a quiet vigilance. The hidden Apache settlement near Whispering Rocks, their destination, was a day's journey. But the desert had other trials to test their mettle. Their water was nearly depleted, the canteen they'd salvaged from Sands Crossing reduced to a few tepid drops, their supplies dwindled to a single strip of jerky and a handful of desert figs Mara had foraged. The sun beat down, its heat a relentless adversary, the silence broken only by the rasp of their breathing, the creak of the sled, and the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. Henry's mind wrestled with his past, his mining crew's abandonment, his son's death from fever, a guilt that shadowed his every step. The presence of Mika and the women, a mirror to his loneliness, stirred a compassion he'd buried, their resilience a challenge to his solitude. "We need to find water soon," Henry said, his voice hoarse from the dry air. Lena nodded, pointing to a faint shadow on the horizon. "There's a dry wash ahead." "It might hold a spring," she replied, her Apache wisdom guiding them through the wasteland. Mika's silence, broken only by soft gasps, hinted at a fear he couldn't voice. The gold his tribe had hidden a burden he carried alone. They reached the dry wash as the sun peaked, its shade a fleeting mercy against the scorching heat. Henry checked the sled, its canvas fraying further, while Lena and Sita scouted for signs of life, their movements swift and practiced. The wash offered a shallow pool, its water brackish but drinkable, a rare oasis in the desert's grip. Henry filled the canteen, offering it to Mika first, his hands trembling slightly. "Drink, son," he said, the words slipping out unbidden. Mika accepted, his eyes softening. "Thank you, Henry," he murmured, a rare warmth breaking through his exhaustion. The moment was brief, but it deepened their bond, a thread of trust weaving through their shared struggle. The desert's forge struck at noon. A sandstorm brewed on the horizon, a roiling wall of red dust that swallowed the sky, its roar a challenge to their endurance. "Get down," Henry shouted, pulling Mika and the sled behind a boulder, the women joining them. The storm hit like a living entity, its force tearing at their clothes, dust clogging their throats and stinging their eyes. Henry shielded Mika with his coat, Lena and Sita huddling close to Mara, the tempest raging for hours, leaving them buried in drifts, their water spilled into the sand. As it passed, the desert revealed a new peril, a coyote, its eyes glinting near the pool, drawn by their scent. Sita's bow sang, her arrow striking its flank, sending it yelping into the dusk. "Good shot," Henry said, his respect for her growing. Sita nodded, her gaze steady. "The desert tests us all," she replied. That night, they camped in the wash's lee, a small fire their only warmth, its glow casting shadows on the rocky walls. The storm had delayed them, the settlement still a day away, and Henry's mind churned with guilt, his crew's desertion, his son's death, now this boy's plight. Mara offered him a fig, her hands gentle. "You fight for us," she said. "Why?" Henry poked the fire, his face shadowed. "I turned away from trouble once my family paid for it. Can't do that again." Lena's eyes softened, her pain surfacing. "Rourke raided us for gold. Mika's the last who knows where it's hidden. We lost everything." The confession hung heavy, a mirror to Henry's regrets. "Strength ain't just in gold," he said. "It's in sticking together." Mika leaned against him, his voice small. "My father said the gold protects us. Rourke killed him for it." Henry's heart ached, his losses echoing theirs. "I lost my boy to fever. Drifted since." Sita's gaze met his, a warmth breaking through. "We're all survivors then. Maybe we save each other." Their talk was interrupted by a rustle. Apache figures emerged from the dusk, led by a tall man with a scarred cheek. "I am Kono, Sarah's brother," he said, his voice cautious. "We saw the storm. Rourke hunts you." He offered a water skin, his eyes on Mika. "You're alive, nephew. We thought you lost." Mika ran to him, tears in his eyes. "Henry saved me." Kono nodded, offering Henry a feathered cord. "You're kin now, Prospector." The reunion was brief but heartfelt. Kono's warriors, 6 strong, joined them, their spears glinting. "Rourke's tracker, Cole, is near," Kono warned. "He won't stop." Henry's heart steadied, his bond with the group a shield. "We fight together," he said. Mika's hand found his trust a beacon. "You're my father," he whispered. The words warmed Henry, a redemption he hadn't sought. The peace shattered at dawn. Hoofbeats echoed Cole and 7 riders, their rifles ready. Kono's men melted into the rocks, leaving Henry and the group exposed. "Run," Kono whispered. But Henry stood firm, his rifle raised. Cole's voice cut through the heat. "Give up the boy, Blake, or die." Henry fired, his shot grazing a rider, but an arrow struck Mara's leg, drawing a cry. Lena shielded her, her spear striking a warrior, while Sita's bow sang, forcing the attackers to retreat. They bandaged Mara's leg, Henry's hands gentle. "You're all my family now," he said. Lena's eyes met his, a warmth breaking through. "And you're ours." The desert forged them, its trials strengthening their bond, but Rourke's wrath loomed larger, a storm they'd face together. Whispering Rocks was near, but so was their reckoning. Rattlesnake Ridge rose like a jagged scar across the Arizona desert, its rocky escarpment of red sandstone and weathered boulders standing defiant against the encroaching dusk. The sun dipped low, casting a fiery glow across the ridge's edge, the air thick with the scent of sun-scorched earth and the faint promise of a cooling night breeze. Henry Blake, Mika, and the three Apache women, Lena, Mara, and Sita, along with the warriors led by Kono, prepared for their stand, the tension palpable in the stillness. Henry's canvas coat was torn, his worn boots caked with dust and blood from his grazed arm, his pickaxe and rifle poised despite the ache in his muscles. His face, weathered with a scar along his jaw, bore a grim determination, his gray eyes shadowed by the weight of his past. Mika clung to his side, the young Apache boy of 8 leaning on a crutch, his tattered shirt fluttering, his small pouch with the gold nugget pressed against his chest. The beaded bracelet from Lena gleamed on Henry's wrist, a symbol of the kinship that had drawn them into this fight. Lena led the women, her buckskin dress adorned with faded beads, her spear ready, her stern jaw set with resolve. Mara, her leg wound bandaged, carried a woven basket now empty, while Sita, her bow strung, stood with a quiet vigilance. Jack Rourke, the bandit who had ravaged their tribe, was coming, his greed for Apache gold driving a force that threatened to end their journey. The ridge offered strategic ground-steep drops for ambushes, rocky outcrops for cover, and a narrow pass for traps. Henry fortified a vantage point with Kono's men, his hands rough from years of prospecting, now skilled in war. Lena rigged tripwires with sinew, her movements precise despite her exhaustion, her knife glinting in the fading light. Mika assisted, stacking stones with Eli, his eyes sharp with the instinct of survival. Rourke wants the gold, Lena said, her voice low and strained. He'll kill us for it. Henry nodded, his guilt over past inaction fueling his resolve. We hold him here, he replied. Eli handed him a sharpened stake, a silent pledge of unity, the weapon's weight a comfort in his hands. Kono distributed spears and arrows, his face painted with earth tones, his warriors blending into the ridge's shadows. Cole leads them, he warned. He's relentless. Henry's heart steadied, his bond with the group a shield against the encroaching dark. We fight as family, he said. Lena's eyes met his, a flicker of trust breaking through her pain. You've become more than a prospector, she said, her words a balm to his wounded spirit. The sentiment lingered, a redemption he hadn't dared hope for, as the wind carried the distant sound of approaching hooves. As dusk deepened, the air grew taut with anticipation, the ridge's silence broken by the crunch of boots on gravel. Jack Rourke rode in with a dozen men, Cole at his side, the tracker's scar-faced grin a harbinger of violence. Rourke, a broad man in a black duster lined with stolen furs, dismounted and called out, his voice a thunderclap against the cliffs. Blake, hand over the boy and his gold map, or this ridge becomes your graveyard. Henry stepped forward, his rifle raised, his voice firm despite the heat. You'll have to take him over my dead body, Rourke, he shouted, his breath visible in the cooling air. The siege erupted like a desert tempest. Rourke's men charged, their rifles and revolvers spitting fire through the dusk. Henry's first shot dropped a rider, the bullet finding its mark with a precision honed by years in the wild. Kono's warriors struck from the shadows, their spears felling 2 more, their movements silent and deadly. Lena triggered a tripwire, a dynamite cache salvaged from an old miner's stash, exploding and sending a shower of sand and rock, scattering the attackers. But Rourke's numbers were overwhelming, and Cole's rifle was a relentless predator, his bullet grazing Henry's side, drawing a sharp hiss of pain. Lena pulled him behind a boulder, her own exhaustion evident. Stay alive, she growled, loosing a spear that struck a man's chest, her aim unwavering despite her fatigue. The ridge became a battlefield, its echoes ringing with gunfire and the thud of falling bodies. Henry fired again, dropping another rider, the heat numbing his hands but not his resolve. Kono's warriors fought with primal fury, their spears piercing the fray, while Eli and Mika lobbed rocks, their small forms a surprising force. But Rourke's voice cut through the chaos. Mika, tell me where the gold is, or they all die. He held a pistol to Kono's head, the warrior's spear shattered, his eyes defiant. Mika's heart sank, his pouch clutched tight. No, he cried, his voice raw with emotion. Henry's mind raced, he couldn't lose another family. He signaled Kono's men to hold, his gaze locking with Lena's, a silent plea for a plan. Lena stepped forward, her stance defiant despite her weariness. Rourke betrayed my tribe to settlers, she shouted, her voice carrying over the wind. He sold them for gold, left us to die when we resisted. The revelation hit Henry like a thunderclap. Rourke's greed wasn't just for land, but for the gold Mika's tribe had buried, a secret the boy carried since the raid. Rourke laughed, his pistol steady. Then you all die with your lies. But Lena moved, shoving Henry and Mika aside as Cole fired, the bullet tearing through her chest. She fell, blood pooling in the dust, her spear still in hand, her sacrifice a shield for them. "Henry, no!" he roared, lunging to her side, his hands trembling as he pressed against the wound. Kono's warriors charged, their spears a blur, felling 3 men in a surge of vengeance. Eli struck with a rock, stunning a rider, while Mika threw his pouch, distracting another. Tom tackled Cole, their struggle a tangle of fists and sand, until his rifle butt crushed the tracker's skull, ending the threat. Rourke roared, charging with his pistol, but Sita's arrow found his shoulder, bringing him down. The remaining outlaws fled, their horses vanishing into the dusk. Henry knelt beside Lena, his hands stained with her blood, his heart breaking as he tried to stem the flow. "Hold on," he pleaded, his voice cracking with emotion. Her eyes met his, a faint smile breaking through the pain. "You're my brother now," she rasped. "Protect Mika. The gold is their future." Her hand fell, her spirit slipping into the desert's embrace, her sacrifice a final act of trust. Kono bound Rourke, his men finishing the fight, the ridge falling silent save for the wind's mournful wail. Rourke was defeated, his men scattered, but Lena's loss was a wound deeper than the heat. Henry cradled her, tears mixing with the dust on his face, the weight of her words sinking in. Mara and Sita approached, placing the carved figure from Lena's pouch on her chest. "She was our leader," Mara said, her voice thick. "Now she's with them." The Apache carried her to a pyre, their chants rising, a tribute to her courage that echoed through the ridge. Henry stood, his guilt eased by her forgiveness, his promise to protect Mika a new purpose. The ridge smoldered, the air heavy with loss and victory. Kono offered Henry a place with the tribe, but he shook his head. "I'll honor her at the settlement," he said, his voice steady. The journey to Rattlesnake Ridge had broken Rourke's grip, but Lena's sacrifice would resonate in the desert silence. Henry's salvation was hers, and Mika's truth, his people's legacy, would live on. The dawn broke over Rattlesnake Ridge, a fragile light spilling across the red sands, where the embers of Lena's pyre glowed like the last embers of a fading hope. The air was thick, with the lingering scent of smoke, and the dry, earthy aroma of the desert, the vast Arizona wilderness, reclaiming the battlefield with a quiet, unyielding peace. Henry Blake stood at the ridge's edge, his canvas coat tattered and dusted with ash, his worn boots planted firmly in the sand, his pickaxe and rifle resting against a boulder. His face, weathered with a scar along his jaw, bore the weight of grief, his gray eyes glistening with unshed tears, the guilt of his past softened by Lena's final words. The beaded bracelet from Lena encircled his wrist, a symbol of the kinship that had brought him to this moment. Jack Rourke, bound and defeated, slumped against a rock, his bandit empire shattered, his greed no match for the courage of a prospector and his newfound family. Mika, the young Apache boy of 8, stood beside him, his feather-adorned hair catching the breeze, his small hands clutching his pouch, his dark eyes reflecting a mix of sorrow and resolve. Mara and Sita, the remaining Apache women, flanked him, their buckskin dresses worn but proud, their faces etched with grief, yet strength. The Apache warriors, led by Kono, moved with a solemn reverence, their painted faces mirroring the mesa's crimson hues as they gathered around Lena's pyre. The flames had dwindled to a gentle glow, the sand around it darkened by melted wax and ash, a testament to her sacrifice. Kono knelt, offering a prayer in Apache, his voice a deep chant that reverberated through the cliffs, honoring a woman who had transcended her role as a protector. Henry watched, his hands trembling, as he placed her small pouch containing the carved horse figure onto the pyre, a silent vow to carry her legacy forward. Mika joined him, adding a handful of desert sage, its aroma mingling with the smoke. "She saved us," Mika said, his voice soft but resolute. "You kept her promise." Henry nodded, the words a balm to his wounded soul, a redemption he hadn't dared to claim. The journey to the hidden Apache refuge began, the warriors carrying the pyre's remnants through the mesa's rocky pass, its ashes a sacred burden. The trail was treacherous, the sand shifting underfoot, the heat of the day giving way to a cooling breeze that carried the promise of renewal. Henry walked with them, his arm aching from the graze, but his spirit lifted by their unity. The refuge emerged, a sheltered canyon nestled between towering cliffs, its floor dotted with mesquite and a faint shimmer of a spring fed by an underground aquifer. The Apache survivors greeted them, their faces etched with grief for Lena but warmth for her savior. Kono led Henry to the spring, its waters clear and life-giving, reflecting the cavern walls adorned with painted symbols and woven mats, a sanctuary Lena had died to protect. Her spirit guards this place, Kono said. You are kin. The tribe gathered around a fire that night, the canyon walls amplifying their voices as they shared tales of Lena's bravery. Her gifts to Henry, her trust, her carved figure, were now symbols of her legacy, their weight heavier than the gold Rourke had sought. They offered him a place among them, their eyes reflecting gratitude and hope. You fought for her, Kono said, handing him a woven blanket. Stay and find peace. Henry hesitated, his mind drifting to his prospecting days, a lonely pursuit since his crew abandoned him, his son's death from fever, a guilt he'd carried like a stone. Lena's words, "You're my brother," echoed, her sacrifice a key to unlock that prison. I'll stay, he said finally, but I'll bring my skills to your refuge, with your help. The days that followed were a blend of mourning and rebuilding. The Apache taught Henry their ways, how to cultivate the spring, how to weave mats from agave, how to honor the land with rituals. Mika became his shadow, the boy's knowledge of the desert complementing Henry's prospecting expertise. They constructed a small adobe shelter near the spring, its walls rising under their hands, a fusion of Apache resilience and Henry's craftsmanship. The desert, once a place of solitude, became a bridge between worlds, its silence broken by the tribe's laughter and the trickle of water. One evening, as the sun set, painting the canyon in shades of orange and purple, Henry stood at the spring's edge, the beaded bracelet a constant reminder. Mika joined him, holding a new pouch woven by the tribe. For you, the boy said. Lena would want it. Henry took it, his eyes misting as he traced its patterns. She gave me more than I deserved, he said. Mika smiled, a rare light in his young face. She gave us family. The sentiment lingered, a bond forged in the crucible of the desert. The tribe celebrated with a feast, their songs filling the canyon, Lena's name woven into the melodies. Henry learned her story in full, how she'd fought to protect Mika during the raid, how Rourke had betrayed her tribe to settlers for gold, how she'd sacrificed herself to ensure their safety. His past, his failure to save his son, his years of aimless wandering faded against her forgiveness. He wasn't just a prospector anymore, but a guardian, akin to those he'd once failed. Kono approached, offering a carved wooden flute. Lead with her spirit, he said. Henry took it, his hand steady. I will. Weeks later, the refuge thrived, its spring nourishing new growth, its people strengthened by Henry's aid. He rebuilt his life, the Apaches help a lifeline, their stories a balm to his loneliness. Lena's pouch hung above the shelter door, a shrine to her sacrifice, its carved figure a silent witness. The desert stretched vast, its red sands a testament to their fight, but it was no longer a place of solitude. Henry's salvation was complete, not in gold, but in the family he'd found: Mika, Mara, Sita, Kono, the tribe all bound by Lena's legacy. As the sun rose over Rattlesnake Ridge, its golden light bathed the canyon, a promise of a new beginning. Henry stood at the shelter's threshold, the wooden flute at his side, the beaded bracelet gleaming. He was no longer just a prospector who'd shown mercy, but a brother to a woman whose courage had saved him, whose truth had turned peril into a legacy of strength. The desert whispered her name, and Henry carried it forward, a new family born from the ashes of sacrifice. The end, and thank you.